Well, this is JC again. I think I'm on a roll here. I went ahead and got a little busy and wrote chapter 25. It's a little shorter than some of the other chapters, but maybe you enjoy listening to it. So I have this is my number two slouch around shirt. And I did shave, though, earlier in the day. You can't tell it now. I sort of, my hair needs to be combed a little bit. But it's all right. It looked pretty good, I guess, for an artist. I was supposed to be an artist of some sort. So anyhow, without further ado, rambling too much, I'll go ahead and start, and I'll read chapter 25 for you. My book I call Todd. Silence now hung over the room like a thick fog. It was like the problem had finally been discovered, but now no one knew what to say or do about it. It was like everyone waited to see what somebody else would say. And Betsy stood up and looked around. I think the coffee's probably ready by now. Who wants a cup? Someone said, that sounds good. I'll have a cup. And the floodgate opened, and everybody answered at about the same time. Yes, I'll have a cup. Boy, that sounds good, and on and on. Well, Jim stood up then and said to Betsy, come on, and I'll show you where the cups and the sugar and stuff are. They went into the kitchen. Betsy grinned at Jim, and he said, whew, I'm sure glad to get out of there. Betsy said, boy, you have no idea what a relief this is. Finding out about who made those calls and stuff, I was seeing images of gangsters and one-way rides to the country and all kinds of stuff. Jim said, yeah, I'll bet you're relieved to find out it was just a good kid worrying about his poor old grandpa. And they both laughed at that one. Well, they finally got cups and sugar and all the things needed for coffee drinking together and put everything on two large serving trays. Betsy chuckled and said, you sure you can handle all that, old-timer? Jim smiled about that, and the two of them carried the loaded trays into the living room. The conversation was very subdued, and nothing was being said about the subject at hand. The trays were put on the large coffee table, and everyone helped themselves to the coffee. After they had taken a sip or two apiece, Leslie spoke. Jake, she said, if you don't mind me asking, what do you do for a living? Actually, I'm still in college, majoring in business administration. This is my last year, and then I intend to send out resumes to major companies, maybe in Denver or Colorado Springs, maybe even Pueblo. I heard they might start CFI back up in a couple of years in Pueblo, Jake added. CFI is Colorado Fuel and Iron, a steel mill and manufacturing company. Back in the 50s and early 60s, and before it was a burgeoning business, but then a rash of companies were sort of forced to relocate overseas in Mexico because of the EPA and the rainbowers and the like. Colorado and many oil companies lost thousands of jobs because of the greenie wackos. That sounds very interesting. Good luck to you, Les said. Now, Todd knew it would be up to him to get some sort of resolution for the problem at hand, and he knew he had to handle it just right so no feelings would be hurt. Sounds like you have things set up pretty well, Jake, and I believe you're up to it. Now, Todd took on a serious look and said, we need to deal with this problem in front of us now. Yeah, Jim said, we ain't getting no younger. Jake spoke up now. We don't want to cause any trouble with you folks. I know you all mean well, but with Grandpa sick and all, we can't help but wonder how long he could go on, working every day the way he does. And he doesn't ever want to discuss it with anyone. I'm not going to ask how long you think you've got, said Junior to Jim, but I think a man ought to be happy doing whatever he's doing for whatever time he has, whether it's long or short. Junior had made a good point, but Todd felt he should steer this in another direction now. He went back to Jake. How long do you think you'll be here after you finish school? He asked. Not too long, said Jake. School's about over, just a couple of more months to go. Then it's just a matter of how long it takes me to find a job. I might have to go to the big cities for a while and see some managers in person. Boy, that sounds exciting, said Todd with a big smile. Yeah, it's exciting just thinking about it. I can hardly wait. Well, Jim, said Todd, sounds like you're going to be losing your grandson before long. The room got very quiet. It's as if no one knew what to say next. The silence lasted 2 or 3 minutes, an eternity to such a group of people. Todd determined to not be the first to speak this time. He could feel Jake's eyes on him, but didn't look back. He could feel a grin forming on Jim's face, not so it would be noticed, but a grin nevertheless. No one else said a word. It was as if they all knew whose turn it was now to speak. Jake looked intently at Todd now, then at his grandfather, an old man whose love he had known his entire life. He realized the light had just come on in his head, a light of realization. He now looked back at Todd. "You're a very smart person," he said. "You can make a point without ever even addressing the issue, and you're right. I don't know if the rest here know what just happened, but I certainly do." Now he spoke to Jim. "Grandpa, I just realized I might not be here for you much longer. Now what would you rather do with the rest of your life, knowing you haven't long to live?" Jake didn't hesitate. "Jakey boy, I'd rather be behind the counter in my store, selling stuff and making money, living the good life. The last thing I want to do is to do nothing but take time to think about things, especially now. I want to be some kind of a success before I cash it in for good. That's what I'd rather do, grandson." Jake looked at his grandfather. His chin quivered slightly and a small tear started in one of his eyes. He said, "I've been acting like a kid, and I've caused so much trouble. I'm sorry, Grandpa." Betsy walked over to where Jake sat, and she sat beside him. She gently wrapped her arms around him and hugged him to her and said, "Son, maybe you were a kid, but I think you just grew up." And this is the end of chapter 25 of my book entitled Todd. Thank you very much, and come back for the next chapter. Until that time, this is JC saying, I'll see you down the road if the good Lord's willing and the creek don't rise.